Google does one and 3M does another one, where their people are allowed to spend 15 or 20% of their time not in their core duties to investigate, explore, which is why we got Post-it notes, which is why we got Gmail. Like these were side projects that people picked up and ran with that were not part of their core functions of their job. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Trust the Process podcast, where we talk about leadership, operations, business, and everything in between. I'm excited for our guest today, Brittany Greenfield. She is a cybersecurity founder and enterprise software leader, known for identifying emerging market opportunities and building the teams and strategies to capture them. She is the CEO and founder of Wabi. I hope I said that correct.
You did.
Where she has pioneered a new approach to bridging security and development through continuous security SaaS platform that integrates security directly into the software development lifecycle. That is a mouthful. Brittany, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks so much for having me, John.
All right, so you have to break that down for us non-techies a little bit. What exactly did all that mean?
So the cybersecurity is a big alphabet soup of acronyms, and the world I work in has been deemed DevSecOps, which really means we're trying to shove security into development. And if you think about how houses are built, there's a set of checks and balances. Right? And sometimes the check is, hey, John, can you toss the level down on the floor before we put the carpet down so we make sure nobody trips? Other times it's we have to wait for the inspector to come in, because if the wiring's bad, not only is it very unsafe, but it's also very costly to repair if we put up drywall. So the same thing happens in software development. You have a set of checks and balances that also vary depending on what you're building. As end users, we log into our banking portal and go, well, that's just my banking website. To the bank, even the menu is secured differently than the dashboard. So what we do is we make it easy for software teams to have security as part of their checks and balances. So that way they don't have to suddenly become cybersecurity experts, but they know that they have the confidence that they're doing the right thing at the right time.
Gotcha. So you are providing a platform or tool product that helps other businesses, websites take care of that security for them.
Exactly.
Okay, great. Well, let's start from the beginning. When did you begin your entrepreneurial journey?
That's always a great question. I think I was always an entrepreneur, right? And, at the time, I was coming up through my career. I got into cloud software at a time that I had to explain in a startup. And I had to define it to all of my friends who said, why aren't you going into iBanking consulting or going to law school while you figure out what you want to do with your life? And when I finally cracked through that a startup is a baby company, and that by working in the cloud, I was not working for the Weather Service nor for NASA, they were like, okay. And I was like, just give it 5 years and this will become standard nomenclature. But I did it both for startups, large enterprises. And I think where I discovered I was an entrepreneur was when I was told I was brought in to bring in that different perspective. Here I was at a multi-billion-dollar, 30-plus-year-old company. And they said, no, we need you to go bring in fresh perspective. And I went, oh, that's kind of what I've always wanted to do. And then I took the leap to becoming a founder after an investor told me, he goes, you've been founding companies for other companies. Why don't you do it for yourself? But I'd argue that other than the operational component of being a founder, the entrepreneurial journey, whether you're just a leader that's brought in to drive change or a founder, is very similar.
Yeah. And as someone who went to law school and didn't become a lawyer to kind of figure out what they want to do in life, I just was that kid who was always told you're going to be a lawyer, you're going to go to law school because which usually means you're an argumentative little shit at times, right? So I took that path and then fell into working for associations and then working for startups and small businesses and everything. And I'm very similar to you, right? I've always been that kind of change agent. I've always come into an organization like, how do we improve this? How do we make it more efficient? How do we make it more effective? And I eventually was like, I got tired of CEOs not taking my advice.
Right.
Until a third party outside the organization told them the exact same thing. I'm like, I'm done with this. Like, right. I'm going to become that third party who you will actually listen to for all the great ideas I have, and that's kind of what began my entrepreneurial journey.
It is, and that's an idea in itself, right? Sometimes there's a reason organizations actually look outside of their doors, even if they do have a great entrepreneur like you, because it's easier from a change management perspective to say, hey, John or Brittany brought in this great idea. Now, how do we make it our own? Versus that was certainly one of the struggles I had. And I got some good coaching early on. They're like, okay, you're a change agent, but you got to understand not everybody's on the same speed and path you are. So I think it's a little easier for the consultant to come in and then people to organize around that sometimes.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, I was working with one organization, and I literally had to stop using the word change.
Yep.
Because it was like, but I'm doing what I've always been told to do. I was like, yeah, but it's not working anymore. So we changed it to redirection. We're
Oh,
redirecting your energy, redirecting the resources over here. We're not making you change. We're just shifting, right? And
I
and,
like that.
and that just opened everything up for them, and they were able to accept it a lot better.
It is, so much. It's our job as leaders to adapt to those in the room with us. And by the way, that could be adapting to somebody that might have a higher title, right? Leadership is not defined in the title that you're given. And, when we adapt, and I think it's a pertinent conversation now as we're talking about bringing in AI as a resource too, that empathy goes a long way, right? That's what's special about humans is our ability to connect in a genuine way, sometimes in a faulty way, maybe not the most efficient way, but when we can bring people along on the journey, that's when we're going to be most successful. And if you have to change words to do that, so be it, right? No extra cost to that. That just means you're speaking to somebody in a way that they can hear and translate.
Yeah, and I would say like I've always been, looking back at my career when I was in house, was being very, very conscious about how I managed change down. Where I often made a mistake was how I managed change up,
Up.
and,
Yep.
and forgetting that, I'm working with a founder who's built this organization over 27 years, and it's their baby and their blood, sweat, and tears, and their identity, and suggesting a small little change like let's adopt some video content was like tore him down, right? Like
Right.
it just was too many steps, too many changes too quick, and that's one of the lessons I learned looking back is keeping the human aspect of it, right? We are all creatures of fear, comfort, habits, which have allowed us to survive for
Correct.
the beginning of caveman days. But when it comes to innovation, growth, and change, it's the enemy.
Correct. Exactly. It's, I find and it's the irony of being a leader. You talked about managing up. Well, a little bit of leadership is rooted in fear, right? By the time a decision makes it to your desk, it's a big decision, right? If it was easy, somebody else would have taken care of it. And so there's a little bit of fear, a lot of bit of perfectionism or, overthinking, however that manifests itself. And that becomes a blocker, whether it's just in our own goals or team goals or company goals. And we have to find a way to get out of our own way on that, not to define a word for the word.
Yeah, I think another thing that I've seen with leaders too is with the ego of leadership. Again, I'm the person with the title, I'm the person who gets the salary. I have to be the one who knows everything, solves every problem. And I
Correct.
think what one thing that happens with that is when a problem comes to them, they stop immediately and everything becomes internal, and they stop
Mhm.
asking questions of their team, stop and inviting their perspectives, their thoughts, their ideas, because they have to solve the problem
Right.
when you might not know the ins and outs of the thing that's causing the problem. And there's that, I think there's a disconnect between they brought the problem to me, it's mine to solve, but then how do I go back to the team to bring them in to be the problem solving with me?
Exactly. And that's where people get hung up, right? I have to solve this perfectly. That's the iteration and perfection. I have to go in, have the answer. And we forget that actually how you make progress is with small steps forward. All right, small step forward. Don't solve problem. Identify what problem is. Step two, think about the questions you want to ask your team. Step three, ask team. Step four, iterate, right? And I think there's become, I talk a lot about there's become this glamorized, highlight reel version of leadership. I had big idea. I made it happen. Watch me in 30 seconds get to success. The old term used to be called BHAGs, right? And everybody forgets that it's really the small incremental goals that get us there. All this doesn't happen overnight, especially in entrepreneurship.
Yeah, I mean, I've been loving the articles that have been circling the last, I don't know, 6, 8 months with Jeff Bezos and the greatest contribution that he said someone ever made to Amazon. It wasn't AWS, it wasn't robots in the factory. It was back in the day when it was like a 5-person team, and they were packaging books on the concrete in the garage on the floor.
Yeah.
And Jeff Bezos says, "Man, my knees are killing me. We need knee pads." And so he said, "No, we need a packing table."
Right.
And he immediately went out and bought 3 packing tables, and they tripled production overnight. There
Right.
wasn't a major technology or mission shift. There was a problem. He went to the symptom of the problem. The other person said, "The problem isn't that our knees hurt. The problem is that we're on our knees. And
Right.
let's solve that."
Exactly. And that's where, I get very frustrated, quite frankly, with the world of entrepreneurship nowadays, is everybody wants to come up with the knee pads and not the packing table. Well, in enterprise software, we call it the point solution versus, or the vitamin versus the cure. And there's a lot, yes, AI, blockchain, robotics, all important, and we will see those manifest. Those are driving our new industrial revolutions. But that will take decades for us to see manifest. This whole in 3 years your job's going to be gone is, right. That's just fear mongering, overhype, right? A great excuse to get a large seed round. There's so many practical things that still need to get fixed. I have one client that is in the gym business, and they're like, "Do you know how horrible it is to take payments, manage membership, and do individual billing for when somebody buys a water?" Like that those are productivity gains, right? Those are things, and it's my lens from the world of enterprise software that 1% productivity gain is massive. And I remember being in B school and told a story about we achieved 1% for a very large global conglomerate. And somebody that was in the consumer space was like, "What are you talking about? That's nothing." And I was like, literally billions, literally billions.
Right.
And, fortunately half the class was enterprise. They came in, they're like, "She's right." But, we've gotten so focused on, oh my God, 1%, that's nothing, right? Oh, you only sent 10 emails today. Well, quality over quantity, right?
Yeah, and even what popped in my head was I've been watching when I have a new movie I like, I tend to watch it over again for a little while, a couple months. And I've seen F1,
Oh yeah,
the
love
movie
it.
with Brad Pitt, right? Like, especially it's all on all the planes. I've been traveling a lot lately, and he's like, he's talking to they're in the war room about the strategy for the race. He's like, "All we need is a tenth of a second from you, a tenth from you, a
Correct.
tenth from you." He didn't ask one person to save a second from the race time per lap. It was each person contributing a little bit to
Correct.
move, a tenth of a second to cumulatively get that 1 second they needed.
100%. And that's where it gets again to incremental progress, right? Let's not try to boil the ocean. Let's say, where can we go get that tenth versus one second?
Yeah.
And I think that's where we're misusing technology a lot. We expect the technology to give us the second rather than a combination of tools, people, process coming together, and each one contributes what they're best at.
Yeah, wholeheartedly. So let me ask you, in your journey, what have you done as a leader that's allowed you to stay fresh, right? To not fall into the habits and the status quo and the way we've always done things. How do you keep yourself and your organization moving forward?
I think one of the key things that I try to take time to do, and I have to have discipline around it, right? Is us entrepreneurs, we're crazy masochists. Like, why actually do something to enjoyable? That sounds
Yeah.
like negative productivity. But I like to call it intellectual playtime. Something where whether I'm just reading an article that may or may not be related to business, I'm poking around on the internet about something I saw and I'm trying to find more information on it. It could be online shopping sometimes, right? Like, but something it's something that works a different piece of my brain and giving myself the permission to do it. And this is not just a, oh, pressure relief side. It actually helps you problem solve better, right? When you don't just double down on the same problem, when you free up and exercise, we have to remember our brain is basically a muscle. You got to exercise all the pieces because that promotes better problem solving, logic, and then you also free yourself, right? There's a reason, and there's the old saying, let's go sleep on it, right? So when you do that, but then to your initial question, it also helps me stay fresh, right? We were ahead of bringing AI into our operations because as I was staying, I went and looked at an old chat GPT just to see how far back it was and what model it was. And it was not working well. Like I abandoned it, but it allowed us to bring AI on as a marketing resource, basically a junior writer early. And so staying ahead of the trends. And I think the other thing is you talked a little bit about almost the vulnerability and the fear of I have to know everything. And put yourself in those environments to say, I don't know this, and I'm going to go learn about this right now. And it doesn't always have to be the trend line. It could be, I don't know a lot about, I'm a golfer, obviously, golf season, right? I don't know a lot about sports psychology. So I've been reading about it. Why? I don't know. It's just interesting. Players are talking about it more. So I picked up a book on it, and maybe one day it'll give me an idea on something. I don't know. Or maybe it improves me. Again, I don't know. And so I think you have to be willing to say, I'm vulnerable and put yourself in those situations.
Gotcha. Yeah, yeah. So another aspect of it, obviously is us as leaders, our mindset, our way of thinking, how we lead. But there's also, as I say, in some of my talks, is unless you're the lead singer of a one-person band, you got to bring the team along with you. So
Yep.
how do you invite your team along for that journey of continuous change, disruption, innovation, and again, and I would probably say like not for change's sake, but to
Right.
keep proving and growing.
I think there's one, again, the lead by example. And I'll go back to the word vulnerability. Be very open that you're doing this because if you show them you're taking the time to do this, they will know that it's a priority and that it's okay, right? Again, this gets back to everybody's in this metrics, and I don't mean, KPIs, is outcome-based metrics. Everybody's in this, volume-based metrics mindset right now. I have to show I was working 8 hours a day, blah, blah, blah. Okay, well, taking an hour to go read something is working because it's helping you do your job better. If I can model that, then everybody does it. So we actually do lunch and learns, and while it started with me always doing it, we put it out. I rarely do it, right? I'm up. We put it out to our entire team to bring to us something that they are interested in. We have something called the Little Library. People get a stipend quarterly to go buy a book. And all they have to do is write a book report. And it actually came out of a joke. I said this to one of our engineers. He took it literally, wrote a book report on some O'Reilly book and presented it to the team. And it was fantastic. And then that spawned somebody else to go look into something they were interested in. And so I think really, again, it's being vulnerable in terms of saying, I don't know everything. And here's how I stay up to date on it. Sometimes that means casting a wide net.
You gotcha. Yeah, yeah. I mean, when you're talking, it made me think of, and I always forget which one is 20%, which one's 15%, but that is it the 80-20 rule or 50, well, Google does one and 3M does another
Yeah.
one.
Yeah.
Where
Yeah.
their people are allowed to spend 15 or 20% of their time not in their core duties
Correct.
to investigate, explore, which is why we got Post-it notes, which is
Right.
why we got Gmail. Like these were side projects that people picked up and ran with that were
Correct.
not part of their core functions of their job.
Right. Exactly. And it's we've become so buzzwordy. Everybody loves to do a hackathon. That happens once, right? That means innovation happens on a scheduled day. Creativity happens on a scheduled day. Exploration happens on a scheduled day. What you need to do is have a mantra just like that, whatever the time allotment is, to say, you need one, this is a leadership lesson. You need to go figure out how to put this into your schedule. But two, it is part of your job, not an event.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's something that's often missed, right? It is, you know, for me, because again, I've always been in the kind of operations side of the house,
Mhm.
cross departmental management. When I'm having people on my team, like I want you to solve problems. I want you to
Right.
find problems. Your job isn't just to do a list of tasks, but
Correct.
part of your job is literally to bring things up when they're not working. Like what always
Exactly.
pops in my head is that CEO manager who like discovers a problem and they go to the junior person and say, "Hey, I found this problem. Let's fix it." And they're like, "Yeah, I knew 6 months ago."
Right.
Well,
Right.
why didn't you say something? Well, did you create an atmosphere for them to say something?
Correct. And it's, it goes back to what we were talking about before, right? Wherever you are in your leadership journey, that next step becomes fearful. I'm supposed to know everything. I spotted a problem and I don't know how to solve it and nobody else has seen it because they're not me. So maybe we just wait to see how it rolls out because maybe I'm the wrong one. Versus saying, "Hey, I saw something. If you know, I saw something that doesn't seem to be working optimally. And it goes back to that incremental of if I take a small step now, then I don't have to solve all of it at once versus you wait for it to become a problem, then you have to solve it all at once."
Yeah, I mean, what popped in my head there was, again, that leader just like, we're going to change this, right? Like
Right.
they get a hair up their ass, right? And they're like, this is the thing that we are going to change this week.
Right.
We're never talking to anyone. Like, is it a problem? Is it not a problem? They just saw something, read something, whatever, and like, this is what we're going to change without tapping into your team and the perspective. Is this where our energy should be focused? Is this a real problem? And let's do energy elsewhere.
Exactly. And that's, you talk about bringing the team into it. There's a reason I'm a big believer you hire for holes, right? If I could do everything, I would. Right? Doesn't mean you should, but right, I would. And I don't. And you bring in different people for different skill sets, different lenses. So why wouldn't you who bring their perspectives into how to solve a problem or how to advance something or take on a task, whatever it is? Because in theory, and this isn't always true in hiring, I'm sure you've heard the old, saying, A players hire A plus players, B players hire C players, etc. And people, as you start to go down that chain, people tend to hire clones, right? Because of that insecurity versus the best leaders say, I want somebody that can do what I can't, right? And help me advance because they bring a special skill set and I'll give them something in return, which is mentorship and whatnot. So bring in those perspectives, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I once had a boss who said, "I don't want you to just think. I want you to think like me."
Yeah,
Well, you just took away all my secret sauce, right? Like
right,
your genius is marketing and sales.
right,
And when it comes to budgeting, that's a bad skill, right?
right,
Like
right, right.
right,
Absolutely.
and try to justify it later. Where I'm like your numbers and ops guy, like that's not where we are. Like this is like in every the budget thing's a great example because every year I would bring him a budget showing us $600,000 in the red every year. And he's like, "This isn't right." And my answer is, "It's right. You just don't like what it says." And
Correct,
he's like, "Let's
exactly.
shave off some expenses here. Let's increase some revenue here." And he'd balance the budget. And then come October, we're out of cash.
Right, exactly. And it's unrealistic, and I think the right way to say what he was hopefully getting at was not I need you to think like me. I need you to see it from my perspective. I was having this conversation the other day with somebody and her company is run out of the UK, but she's part of the US team. And there's a slightly different mentality in budgeting. And she said, if you want me to go grow our network, I need a pool of slush fund that I can, whether it is me taking somebody out for one drink or taking a team out for a nice dinner, that's how I build our network over here. And I need you to just trust me on this. And they're not seeing it from her perspective. Whereas you've hired me to grow a network in the US. How can I do that if I have no resources? But I respect the fact you're trying to run a business. And that goes back to we need to be able to put different lenses on it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Two things about the A team aspect. One is, I think a lot of leaders, and I've worked with some people who have done this, who confuse type A personalities for type A players or for
Agreed.
A players, right? Like I brought a candidate to a CO once. He's like, she's frumpy. Like,
Right.
like, why does that matter? Like he wanted an outgoing personality and blah blah blah, and then they also were this duo founding team. They're also constantly frustrated that people wanted raises or promotions right away, like because all you did was hire people like you who want to grow and
From
like
right.
you don't need everyone to be wanting to become COO, right?
Right.
You want that person who loves being a bookkeeper and wants to stay in that bookkeeping job and get their COLA increases, right?
Exactly. And that's one of those things you have to look across the organization, look across, I talk about hiring for holes. When I do some coaching for organizations and leaders, I have people look basically at a 2 by 2 and evaluate how important is this and what's your skill level and what's the risk of it being done right or wrong. And that can help you direct where you're investing. If you want to hire a team where everybody wants to be a COO, you're going to burn through your budget really quickly. There are a lot of people that are great at just being an operationally minded person and don't want the responsibility. They want to clock out at 5, and that's great because that person is going to make sure all the files are organized, that the people are paid on time, everybody has their tax information, whatever it is. And when you call them and say, where's this contract? Here you go, right? Like, and that's what you want. That's not the same as a COO, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, my wife works for county government. She's in compliance, and her boss said, "Hey, her boss has really been wanting to groom her to
No,
take over her job when she's ready to retire." And she come to my wife and like, what's your goals? And it's like, I don't have any. Like,
right.
I want to keep my job. I love my job. She didn't say this, but like, it allows me some latitudes right here and there. But like, her boss works twice as much as she does for 20% more pay.
More,
Like,
right.
like she's like, I'm like, yeah, that's not worth it. It's not worth the stress and anxiety over an extra 20 grand a year.
Exactly. And there's also different phases of life. I went through an acquisition early in my career, and when I left the company, the who had been the president ended up becoming the GM of the business unit. And I said, I'm surprised you're not leaving, right? It's getting boring around here. And he said, you know what? The time's right. I can leave at 3 and go to my kids' game. I get to be home for dinner. Yeah, I might have to go to Japan for 2 weeks, but that's, it's me being dog and pony. And right now, the time's right to do that. I'll get bored in a couple of years, but I like to think about people's, priority as being a pie where the lines move sometimes. And it's also important when whether you're hiring, you're negotiating something, everybody's pie is different. So you have to get to know what their pie is because it'll be important for how they look at things, how they're incentivized, how they're motivated.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. I mean, I talk all the time about the greatest thing leaders are not doing and should be doing to improve the culture or performance is getting to know your staff.
Yeah,
And again, not what kind of beer do you like or what do you want on your pizza, but like what winds your clock, what makes you excited to
correct.
come to work every day, what are the things you love doing in your job, and what are the things you hate. And I know that's something that's seen as like a Gen Z problem where they want to do what they want to do and not what they don't want to do. Tap into that.
Tap into it. If you can motivate somebody with their own natural, engine, why not? Something that we do, I think performance reviews have gotten such a bad rap.
Yeah.
And so we call it, and then on top of it, you can't call it professional development plan because then people go, I'm getting fired, right?
Right.
And so, we've taken a slightly different approach, but, cobbled together little bits and pieces. But one of the questions when we have everybody fill it out is, what are your goals? And I actually ask it in my interview process. Tell me 3 to 5 years from now, what makes you say, this was the best choice of my career, not because we had some crazy exit or you got some title or something. What did you get out of it? And we stay on top of that to say, as part of that professional development plan, to say, okay, what do you want to accomplish this year? What do you want to accomplish this quarter? And how can we help you achieve that?
Yeah, 100%. Last time I redid, a review process, they were still doing like the old school, like rank me 1 to 5 in these 40 areas. I'm like, no, this needs to be a series of conversations of our
Correct.
questions. Like, what are your goals for the next 5 years? what is something you could see that could be done to improve your job and make help you to be better, as well as the entire organization? Like tap into the perspectives of what's actually going to move the needle, not
Correct.
some archaic ranking system on a dot.
Exactly, right? Like, I think we have five questions of that get to that ranking because at some point in time you have to have a level set, but and make sure that the boss and the employee are on the same page about how well they're doing. But no, the rest of it, that's what's important. That's how you drive somebody. The cost of replacing an employee is half the cost of their salary at least. And so why not work with what you have until it really proves because employment is a two-way street. So maybe it's you and not them.
Right. Yeah, 100%. And I always say that, again, the old way of doing this is like if your employees finding out once a year or once a quarter or once a
Right.
month that they're not performing, like that's a management problem.
That's
That's
a
not an employer problem, right? Like they should not be finding out at the end of the year when they're not getting their bonus.
right,
Why? Right?
right, exactly.
They should like uh, uh, these meetings should not be gotcha. Like
No,
everyone should know like what we're coming in, what that relationship is like, how I'm performing already.
and on top of it, if I only set goals once a year, then I'm only going to accomplish one thing once a year versus, back to that iteration. You do it quarterly, it allows you to say, I learned something this quarter. Maybe I realized I'm not proficient enough in X. Can you help me go find some training on this? Versus you get to the end of the year and I haven't had the chance to ask you that as an employee. Well, of course I won't have achieved it.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, and I even apply that. So for my consulting, what we do is really go in and diagnose the gaps and holes existing in operations, the
Mhm.
leadership alignment, the culture, the operational strength, maturity, efficiencies, and I look at this as kind of similar to how we're talking about with the staff, but also how you view your organization. People tend to like do their annual 3-year, 5-year strategic planning processes, which are these big initiatives of where they want to go and where they want to be. And they usually crash in the first 3 to 6 months because one little element of that goes away and they
Right.
throw out the whole thing. Where I'm like, look at this. Diagnose where you are, find
Right.
the gaps and holes that are existing, improve those, improve your metrics, and then grow from there.
And this is again why you have to break these goals into smaller pieces, right? You don't show up to the gym and say, I'm going to get a six pack today and expect to walk into the gym without it and walk into it. Step one, show up to the gym. Step two, find some kind of exercise to do, and come up because you're setting yourself up for failure if that doesn't happen. If you don't have the chance to show up to the gym one day, oh my God, it's out the window. No, you say, I have a plan, and it also has to be not at 0 or 100. I find 70% is the true success rate. Forget the 80-20 rule, like 70%. Am I 70% done, right? If you think about a building being built, typically it's actually kind of done at 70%. That last 30% is paperwork,
Right.
right? Or punch lists, or anybody that's ever renovated a home knows that punch list lasts forever. And you move
Right.
in at 70% because otherwise you're never going to move in.
Sure, 100%. So when you're working with other entrepreneurs and mentoring them, working with them, what are the biggest problems you see them facing?
I think it's this just I can, therefore I should. We talked about hiring for holes. It was something I faced absolutely as I was coming up through the founder ranks, especially, right? Because you get into stress situation and your worst tendencies come out, not your best. And I had this sense that I'm a technical person, but I don't write code. So, oh my God, all of our money has to go towards writing code. I should do all the back office and the marketing and da da da. Those are not my skills, right? My skills are identifying market opportunities, building the strategies, very similar to you, working with product teams and all that stuff. And, I realized, and entrepreneurs do the same, all entrepreneurs do the same thing. And it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. Oh my gosh, I have to have control over this because if it goes wrong, it's going to go horribly, horribly wrong, right? It's that fear. And so you're making decisions out of fear versus, hey, something can actually be done well enough by somebody who actually has the skill set. And I may be paying $40 an hour for them, but that's freeing up my probably $250 hour, whatever, right? Every hour of your time you can free up has an exponential, and that's where you have to, that's where you have to understand that risk reward. And I was talking about sort of the matrix I have a lot of entrepreneurs go through to say, where should I be the lead on it? Where should I outsource it? And then how much should I invest in outsourcing it, right? So
Yeah.
I invested in hiring a CTO. That was never something I was going to be able to do. I use Chat GPT for marketing, right? Oh, and then I have a great ops person in the middle that pulls things together. Right. That it's not the prettiest, but not everybody has to be a COO, right? Like I don't have to have a full marketing team. That would be dumb for us.
Yeah. 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 And one thing I see a lot with a lot of founders I've worked with is they tend to outsource their zone of genius first,
Yeah.
which is why they get stuck in the operations because they didn't invest there, right?
Correct.
So like I have to oversee this, and there's a founder I was working with mid last year, and I can tell a lot about a leadership, a mindset, the culture, and the operations by looking at their accounting systems. Like it tells you so much about control, over management, not trusting your team, the whole 9 yards. And I walked into
Totally guilty.
I watched this guy was like everything was a mess. They were duplicating payments. They weren't making payments. Like, and I was like, so I got everything, and I was like, I went to him. I was like, we got to change this, right?
Right.
And it took 4 memos, about 5 meetings in 3 months
Right.
to convince him to change a system he already knew was broken.
Right.
And the reason was because how can you tell me that this is the right fix? It's like the problem before was you didn't have a process.
Correct.
Now we have a process, and we just do this. It will fix your problem. I promise.
Right. People have forgotten, I'm a technologist, and what we were always trained was people, process, then tools. And in this world where there's infinite numbers of tools to do everything, we think stick a tool on it and it'll fix it. And that's just not the case. If you don't have the process, it doesn't matter, junk in, junk out. And if the person's not on board, then it doesn't, then, this is why it went through 5 sessions. But I love what you said about founders and entrepreneurs tend to outsource their area of expertise first. And you're right. And it's unintentional. They think, I don't even think it's an ego thing. It's just oh my God, I got to go do all this other stuff because now this is my responsibility. No, your responsibility is to make sure it's done correctly and not even perfectly. Correct isn't perfect, right? That it just gets done. And think about it. I think we delude ourselves. Think about how often you see in public companies earnings restatements. Nobody did anything wrong for that. They just sort of things got fumbled around and people realized there was this one missed invoice or something like that, and we're going to do this. This stuff happens all the time. And when you take that pressure off yourself, and I think that's the difference between a founder and an entrepreneur or a business unit leader or whatnot, suddenly it's my responsibility and it has to get done just right. And I can only put that pressure on myself. It wouldn't be fair for me to put it on somebody else. No, this is how the world works.
Going back to the founder, outsourcing their zone of genius, I just was thinking about this while you're talking. Do you think it's partly due to the fact because that's where they're most comfortable making a decision because they know the most about that area?
Yeah,
I have
it's
seen.
easiest. It's
Yeah,
easiest. It
yeah,
takes the least energy, but then they also have to, right. So yeah, it takes the least energy. So you go, well, I should spend more time on all of this stuff that's going to take more energy because clearly if it's taking more energy for me, not from an ego perspective, then, well, then that means it's very important, right? Versus oh, well, I can tap into that. Well, when you spend all this energy on stuff that you're not good at, your brain's not going to have time. You're right. I can't tell you end of month closing. That's not where my brain goes. I like a good dashboard, and it's exhausting for me for a week, right? And
right.
you're like, and it shouldn't be. That makes me a less productive human, and my value is in being able to push everything forward.
Yeah, you got to find that balance of what is the information I need as
Correct.
the CEO, as the owner, as the founder. What information should I need to make sure that I am trusting but verifying, and I feel comfortable where the numbers are, where I feel comfortable where this is, and then trusting the team that they're delivering the right information to you. You're digesting that, and and if there's a problem, they're going to let you know.
Correct. Exactly. Like you said, at some point in time, you just have to trust. And and know that if something is wrong, it is not the end of the world. And that's how you're going to make forward progress, right? You can't be a perfectionist and actually move forward. And I'm talking as a perfectionist, right? But it gets scary. You're accepting people's money. You're signing all these things, and you're just like, let me go back into the woods and have nobody talk to me, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I worked for a boss that like every time there was a problem, it meant it was someone's fault.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
something shit just happens. Things fall through the crack. Doesn't mean every time someone's stupid, lazy, incompetent. No, shit happens, and it happens all the time. Like like I look at like early in my career I did event planning, right? And like your goal as an event planner is to have 1,000 problems that no one ever notices. Like
Correct.
that's
Exactly.
your
Because
goal.
there's always going to be 1,000 problems.
There's always gonna be an audible here, there, and everywhere. But the goal is like no one knows it happened. And
Correct.
like you tweak, you change, you move on, and that's how we got to run our businesses across the board.
Right. You can't get held up in the moment, because if you're looking for perfect information, you said it, you have to call an audible. And that audible could be in the moment of something actually happening, or it could be just your daily to-do list. Like, hey, one of the things when I'm working with other entrepreneurs and leaders, I say, like, you have to be able to figure out what done is, right? Like, this is good enough to take the next step. And that could be is writing this email, or it could be an investor deck, and your standard's going to move depending on where you are. But if you don't define that finish line, you're never going to get there, right? The event's never going to happen. You'll never ship the deck. You'll never send the email, because if you don't know what done is, then it's never done.
Yep. Well, Brittany. By the way, let me say that I like the way you spell your name. That's the way my wife spells her name. The
Oh
correct
my
way
gosh, I love your
to
wife. I
name.
knew she was a smart woman.
I could go on talking to you all day long, but it's time to start wrapping this up. So I let everyone know where they can get in touch with you, and if there's any initiatives that you're working on right now.
Yeah, absolutely. You can always reach me on LinkedIn, with Brittany spelled the correct way, or on my website, brittanygreenfield.com. Please reach out. Let me know that you heard me here on John's podcast. I'd love to connect. And right now, I hope you all will tune into my podcast, Good Enough, which brings a lot of my lessons, like yours, learning from helping other leaders and entrepreneurs, being able to get over themselves, really, to get over their perfectionist tendencies and know that you are good enough, that the work you do is good enough, and that's how you make forward progress.
Yeah. Great advice. And my last question I ask all the guests is, is there a book, a quote, a song, or something that's helped change your life?
Yeah, I'm probably to bastardize this a little bit, but I think this fits nicely with our conversation. Ben Horowitz wrote a book called The Hard Thing About Hard Things. And I literally I pulled the page out and I keep it on my desk. And it says, I realized I needed to focus more on what I needed to do to get right and stop worrying about what I did wrong to move forward. And I think that's just something that as leaders we have to embrace, because otherwise you're not making momentum. It's not about always getting it right.
Their dog in the background.
My dog just came in from a walk.
I had some scratching at the door earlier. I don't know if you can hear or not, but my wife watches. We have a dog. My wife watches dogs as well.
Yeah.
So we have 3 dogs here right now, and it's can be a lot sometimes. But no, that's great advice. And I think, one thing that I often, even though I focus on operations and culture, I can't handle that without also working on the leadership of the mindset and getting them to letting go of control, letting go of fear, allowing them to forgive themselves, allowing them to put themselves out there and risk failure in these little incremental things that not going to blow up the whole building, if something goes wrong, but just being able to trust, right, and let go and play a little bit.
Exactly. It's that getting over the fear of failure and getting back to trusting yourself. And I don't know why we lose it as we get rewarded for being good enough, right? Like, and that is, it's a great paradox, and we could probably talk for another 45 minutes on this, and I would love to. And, why do we lose that? What happened that as we succeeded, you're getting the dog in the background now. She knows how to open up my door. And what was it that we did to ourselves when everybody said, you're good enough? Go take the next step. Take on the next big problem. You're going to be great. And so it's self-inflicted wounds.
Yeah, well, that's a great way to end. Podcast is called Trust the Process, which is all about leaders just, having faith in what they're doing in their team and everything. And it does begin with trusting yourself and believing yourself in that you have the power, the abilities to make this happen, partially by tapping into those around you and their perspectives, right, as we talked about the entire show. But again, Brittany, thank you so much for the show. It's been a wonderful conversation. I wish we could go for another 45 minutes, but we got to end some point. So thank you for being a part of it.
Thanks, John. It's really been a pleasure, and maybe we'll have an excuse to do this again then.
It sounds great. And to all the listeners, if you have not subscribed to the podcast, please do so and follow myself and Brittany on LinkedIn, YouTube, whatever, where you can find us. And we'll see you next week.